All right. I'm going to go ahead and call to order the Farragut Board of Zoning Appeals for Wednesday, October 24, 2018. Chair recognizes that it's at least 7 p.m. on his watch and very close to that on the town's watch. I'd like to start this evening a little different by asking all of the members of the board to introduce themselves from my left. So starting down here to the right, just because we have some new members.
Sure. Michael Wilson.
My name is Jim Holliday.
Keith Alley.
Scott Meyer.
Jennifer Collins.
And pleasure to have you all here this evening. The first item, we have 6 items on the agenda. The first is the approval of minutes for the July 25, 2018 meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to review those minutes?
Yes.
Do we have any motions with regard to those minutes?
I move to approve.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, do I have any discussion? All right, call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries for the approval of the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to abstain. I was not here for the last meeting.
Very good. Thank you. Sorry I missed that.
That's okay.
Second item on the agenda is the election of officers. Do I have any nominations for any officer positions?
So are all the officer positions just expired, or do we just have one opening?
No, it's all. Isn't it all, Mark?
Yeah, you're supposed to
Every year?
reappoint the officers annually. Typically, the annual meeting is in July because that's the start of our fiscal year, but we haven't had, we knew we were in transition with the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Okay.
So we waited until the next meeting, which has become this one,
Okay.
to take. And we have the 3 positions, chairman, vice chairman, and secretary.
So can I make a nomination?
Certainly.
Is there a certain office that do we go in with a certain order,
You
or?
can go whatever order you want.
Okay, I would like to nominate Keith Alley for chairman.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll abstain. All right, second office, do I have any nominations for the vice chair? Would anyone be particularly interested in serving as vice chair?
I nominate Michael.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor? Call for a vote. Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone? All right. Motion carries. Third one is our secretary. Is that correct, Mark?
Yes. Yes, sir.
I'd like to nominate Jennifer Collins.
Do I have a second?
Had the system going here.
I second.
Any discussion?
Ed, I'm sorry. Oh, Michael, okay.
All right, then call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, looks like we have 4 remaining items. All seem related in nature, but we'll take each one up one by one. So just to be very clear, we're going to call them as they appear on the agenda, talk about that specific one, and then take a vote on it and move to the next one. So to save time, certainly you can relate back to something we already talked about, but we're going to try and focus on the ones on the agenda in the order they appear. So the first one is a public hearing on a request for a variance from the town's sign ordinance and the Farragut Zoning Ordinance to permit a second pre-menu board sign for a Starbucks drive-thru located at 101 South Campbell Station Road, Farragut Gateway Development, 2.217 acres, Zone C1, and located in the mixed-use town center planning area. Valley Signs and Surveys, LLC applicant. Do we have someone here for the applicant? All right. All right, if you would please stand, and we'll go ahead and swear you in if you intend to provide proof this evening. Could you state your name first?
David Rodax,
Okay, and where do you reside?
Greenville, South Carolina.
All right, and do you swear or affirm that any testimony you'll provide to this board will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? All right, thank you. All right, typically what we do is we hear from the town staff first. So if we could, go ahead, Mr. Shipley.
This item is for well, it's related to the project up at the corner of South Campbell Station and Kingston Pike, which I'm sure everyone has noticed is well under construction, very nice looking project. And this particular agenda item involves a pre-menu board for the Starbucks, which would be in the northernmost building, the smaller of the two buildings that will be developed on this piece of property. This is a sign that the staff indicated to the applicant some time ago it was not provided for in either the sign ordinance or our mixed-use town center portion of our zoning ordinance. But it still had to go through the Visual Resources Review Board since it is a freestanding sign for their formal action, with the understanding and trying to work with their timeline that the VRB really would have no option other than to deny the request because it's not allowed in the ordinance. The applicant did go ahead and apply for a variance, assuming that would be the action taken, and that the VRB did deny this sign request at their meeting last evening. Specifically, the project, this project is located in the mixed-use town center portion of our future land use map, and it does have some additional provisions, some of which relate to signage, particularly with menu boards. This is a district land use category that is intended to be a little less automobile intensive than maybe regular general commercial. And so where a drive-through, which is an auto intensive type of site element is allowed in this district, it's limited to one lane and one menu board. Basically the drive-through and the menu board have to be screened so that they're not visible from adjacent properties or rights-of-ways, because again, we don't want to focus on an automobile element in the mixed-use town center part of the town. Now, they are allowed to have a regular menu board in the zoning ordinance of up to actually 36 square feet. Outside of the mixed-use town center, the entities can only go up to 30 square feet, so they actually have more signage that's allowed for a traditional menu board in the mixed-use town center, provided that it is screened so that it's not visible. So basically, the intent of the town center area is to lessen the visual prominence of a drive-through and anything associated with the drive-through. So that's one of the reasons why in the language of our ordinance we only provide for the one menu board. So the second menu board, the pre-menu board sign that's requested by the applicant in the general location noted there with that arrow, is not provided for. Basically, at this point, the staff, along with the VRB, would have to recommend denial of the variance request because it's an extra sign that's just not provided for anywhere in either the sign ordinance or the zoning ordinance. And since they have already obtained approval for the 36 square foot menu board, that was actually obtained back in September at the VRB meeting, they don't have a hardship or any loss of use of signage on the development. Certainly they could, if they wish, pursue a text amendment, if they wanted to have their sign package revisited and have the language in the zoning and or sign ordinance amended to accommodate their request, and that certainly could be a process they could go through. But as it's stated right now, it's not a sign that's provided for, and the Board of Zoning Appeals really, from the staff's perspective, wouldn't have the authority to grant a variance in this case. But if you all have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those. The sign itself is about 12 square feet. That's the frame in all. The message part is smaller, but the frame is about 12 square feet, so it is a pretty large sign.
Mr. Shipley, then, am I correct in understanding that Exhibit B, subsection 2B4, is the relevant section that we're looking at for this particular agenda item?
Yeah, let me double check that. Yes. Yes, because in the mixed-use town center, the menu board provisions are addressed in the zoning ordinance rather than the sign ordinance for that type of sign. That's correct.
And so is it my understanding then the town's position is that with regard to this particular agenda item, that the applicable restrictions do not permit it, and that the board doesn't even have discretion, in the town's opinion again, to consider a variance under anything that we have available to us?
Yeah, that would be the staff's recommendation, yes.
All right. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Shipley? All right, we'll certainly hear from the applicant. If you would, if you just state your name again. Again, it's being filmed, and sometimes it picks you up, sometimes it doesn't. But if you can state your name and just say you've been previously sworn, we'd be happy to hear from you.
Yes, my name is David Rodatz. I'm with Hilton Displays. We work alongside Valley Signs that are just doing the permitting. I've been previously sworn in, and with this particular situation, whenever Starbucks does develop a branded product with a drive-through.
May want to pull the microphone to you if it's,
Is that better?
yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
So they'll always have their developed scope regardless of the other signage within the package. So in this particular situation, we understood going in what the code allowed, what it did not allow, and we were prepared to move forward with that. Now with the pre-menu board, that's a developed scope that they like to include just for visual for customers moving forward in the drive-through lane. So it's not just a piece they add there with the menu board. They think not just aesthetically, but to help some certain customers, since their brand has become a little bit too large for just the menu board itself. The pre-menu board is just an accessory of that to help some customers that are sitting in line. So from a PR standpoint, it helps them as well as give them a little bit more information before they can make use of the menu board. So anything with a drive-through, they've always included the pre-menu board to be within that, just as add-on with everything else that's included in the drive-through standards.
Any questions for the applicant? I have a brief question. So if I understand correctly, you're indicating that they understood that this wasn't permitted when they applied, but that they're asking for it at this point. Assuming that this board determines it doesn't have any discretion to grant the variance, do you know, do they intend to move forward with an amendment, a request for amendment to amend these things, or?
Yes, when they initially develop the signage, this schematic, they don't go in it assuming that it will be denied, but it will always be part of their package regardless. So in this particular case, if it is denied, they would see what steps would be allowed to try to keep it and take those steps moving forward. And if so, whatever steps are allowed by them or by the city, they would like to see that forward.
Does anyone have any further questions of either the town or the applicant, or do I have a motion?
I have just a quick question. And again, I'm new here, but so I'm trying to get a handle on the zoning things. But under variances, there's a statement. The purpose of the variance is to modify the strict application of specific requirements of the ordinance in case of exceptionally irregular, narrow, shallow, or steep lots, or other exceptional physical conditions which would result in practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship. Can you explain a little bit? I mean, how would this create an unnecessary hardship? I mean, excuse me, the denial of this would create an exceptional hardship or deprive the owner of reasonable use of his land?
With the pre-menu board for Starbucks, for them, it's just an extension of the menu board itself to include other menu items for them. And in Starbucks' perspective, for them not to have that would be to deny them certain items or information that they would find pertinent to customers that are sitting in the drive-through lane. That's what they see that's important with the pre-menu board. Not so much as extension of the menu board that's already there, but additional information that they think is going to be useful to customers as they're sitting in line. Then they don't have that visual on the menu board, and it's available for them to look at to get some additional information before they're able to place their order. And taken away from that, then they would rely solely on the menu board when they actually get up to order.
So can you tell us what the average size of a typical menu board is? Is it 36 feet? Is it 30 feet?
Are you speaking just from Starbucks perspective?
Yeah, just
or?
for this particular project.
Yes, that's about the average. This is what they consider a 5-panel menu board. They also have a slightly smaller version that's 3-panel, and that goes down an additional 10 to 15 square feet. That's a good bit smaller. But for this one here, this is about their standard size they use for menu boards.
So if I understand correctly, this is sort of a preference of Starbucks. Starbucks prefers to have a pre-mini board because it carries so many items and they find it helpful to market those additional items to their customers in advance of the actual mini board where the order is placed.
Correct, because that pre-menu board primarily is used for promotional items or seasonal that they're not able to just add to the menu board at a given time. So it is, in that sense, it is an extension of the menu board that they're not able to include on it as well.
The town actually amended the sign allowance for menu boards. It started out at 12 square feet in the mixed-use town center. So they amended it to go up to the 36 square feet. Basically, probably it was from the property owner, but I'm sure he was getting asked by Starbucks probably to do that, to try to accommodate their menu board. But again, the goal of this part of town is not have a lot of clutter, a lot of freestanding signs that, aren't essential. And so I just want to give a little context on the menu board itself. It was substantially increased from what it was originally in that district.
And again, Mr. Shipley, it's a mixed-use town center.
That's right.
So as a practical matter, it's not as wide open as a strictly commercial area and supposed to have a certain look or feel that, again, this board doesn't control how that development goes or is approved. We just enforce the rule.
Yeah.
Yes. Any further questions?
So do you feel the patrons of Starbucks would not be able to place an order if the smaller menu board was not in place?
No, I do not think it would impede an average customer's order. Because again, they would still come up to the order screen, look at the menu at that point. So no, it would not impede anyone's decision or ability to make an order at Starbucks.
Thank you.
Chair will entertain any motions.
I'd like to make a motion. I would like to move that we deny the variance because, one, I don't believe this board has the authority to grant one in this situation. Secondly, because the second sign is not provided for in the ordinance as it reads currently. And thirdly, because it appears to me that a patron would still be able to make an order without the second sign.
All right, I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, any discussion? All right, call for a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstains? Motion carries. All right. We will move on to our next item agenda, Agenda 4, public hearing on a request for a variance from the town sign ordinance to permit a thank you exit-only sign for a Starbucks drive-thru located at 101 South Campbell Station Road, Farragut Gateway Development, 2.217 acres, Zone C1, and located in the mixed-use town center planning area. Valley Signs and Surveys LLC applicant, and we still have the applicant here, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
All right. And again, typically, we hear from the town. You're welcome to sit down during this time, or you're welcome to remain standing. It's completely up to you. You have our whole floor this evening, so you're welcome to stay there. All right, Mr. Shipley.
Well, really, this and the next two items on the agenda are all the same type of sign, directional parking signs. And similar to the pre-menu board, this was presented to the VRB last night, and they recommended denial because it's, again, not provided for. In this case, the provisions related to directional parking signs are in the actual sign ordinance as opposed to the zoning ordinance. Basically, in the sign ordinance, you're allowed one ground-mounted directional sign per entry and exit to a parking lot. They have obtained approval for those directional signs that are allowed under the current code. That was approved back in September by the VRB. The additional directional signage that's shown there as sign D on that overhead item is just not provided for in the ordinance. Staff would note, however, that if the concern is encouraging proper traffic flow through the parking lot, the town does have provisions for regulatory signage through the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices signs that the applicant could take advantage of. Those actually don't require a permit. It's stuff like stop signs, yield signs, one way, those type of things. And it appears from the staff's perspective that a lot of these freestanding signs are really just, and I don't blame the applicant, but it's really just a branding exercise. And because there are signs that are available to help with true wayfinding related concerns. And you also have to keep in mind that Starbucks is not the only entity on this piece of property. There'll be potentially 3 other tenants in the second building. So, again, an objective of the mixed-use town center is to not have a lot of visual clutter or try to minimize that to the greatest extent possible. So again, these freestanding directional signs that are targeted toward one entity in this larger development are just not provided for, and the staff would recommend denial of this variance request. It again is an item that, from a staff's perspective, would not qualify for a variance as provided for in the language of our sign ordinance.
Mr. Shipley, other than the other signage that you indicated may be available, but without need for a permit or a variance or things like that, are there prohibitions against signage on the asphalt or the paving? For example, an arrow going out.
Yeah, they could do that, and they are proposing to do that. I think it's not my decision, but I think they need to think about that as the overall project to make sure that it doesn't appear that the whole development is one entity. But they can do that, and I think they are doing that. But these extra signs that are, the directional parking signs are really, I think, more of a branding effort than really necessary.
Question. Are these signs, is this a standard Starbucks layout of a drive-through? And the reason I ask is there are 12 signs just within a very confined area. To me, that seems like a lot of sign overload.
Do you mean the overall package of signage? When you say 12?
Yes, I mean, if you go to Starbucks anywhere, will you see all of these signs jammed in together like, well, can you see this? So there are 12 signs right within this small area right here.
Yes, I mean, that really depends on the location itself. But if you go to a standard Starbucks with, similar to this property, with a drive-through, you'll see roughly the same scope. Now, you may see some, with a speaker post instead of a digital order screen, or the clearance bar might be a different size, or there may be a slight discrepancy in the number of directionals you see, depending on the layout of the lot. But overall, with a standard Starbucks, with a drive-through, you'll see very similar sign packages, especially as it comes in regards to the drive-through and directionals. The number just may be slightly different.
And that was a question, would the applicant like to make a statement? Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, with this thank you exit only sign, this is just strictly traffic control. Before this actually became standard, because the thank you exit only is actually relatively new. Over the last few years, they're having major issues of traffic control of customers driving the wrong way through the drive-through. So this was added to the scope several years ago to prevent that. And for Starbucks with thank you exit only, it's really not has anything to do with branding. It's just a safety issue for them. Now, some direction you'll see may have their logo on it. Those can also always be removed. So for them, it's strictly traffic control and a safety issue for customers coming in and out of their drive-through.
You heard Mr. Shipley indicate that there's other signage that may be available that doesn't require any sort of permit.
Correct, and that would be something that we would look into if this isn't if this is denied, because that will still be our number one priority for the drive-through lane, is making sure that doesn't become an issue at any point.
And that's absolutely a valid concern. You don't want people driving in the out.
Yeah.
So. But it does sound like there's some other options with regard to the asphalt markings or the macadam markings and other signage.
Yeah, they should have a stop bar there at the end of the drive-through lane too, as a visual indication that you should stop. Hopefully you're looking in both directions, but.
So we are discussing items 4, 5, and 6 together?
No,
Or
not together.
Okay, okay.
We're just on 4.
Okay, okay.
Just to keep it clear.
Then we're good. I'm make sure I'm right with you. I confuse easily. I drive through the out often, so right, and so let's make sure I'm at.
And I'd note that this particular one is Exhibit F, isn't it, Mr. Shipley, under our sign ordinance, Section 109-10, subsection 2, prohibited signs.
Yes, because it's not specifically permitted. That's right.
All right, does anyone have any further questions of the town or the applicant? The chair will entertain any motions.
I'd like to make a motion. I move that we deny the variance because the signs as presented are not provided for in the ordinance, and because it appears there's other means for directing traffic, such as asphalt signs.
All right, and do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call for a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstains? Motion carries. All right, moving on to agenda item number 5. Public hearing on a request for a variance for the town sign ordinance to permit a Starbucks drive-through directional sign in the parking lot serving their facility located at 101 South Campbell Station Road, Farragut Gateway Development, 2.217 acres, Zone C1, located in the mixed-use town center planning area. Valley Signs and Surveys LLC applicant. Applicant is still present. Chair notes. And ask the town.
Well, I guess I could press the replay button. There's two of these, this agenda item and the next one, they're identical, and they're in those locations shown there. Again, I think the idea was they're trying to enhance traffic flow through there, and there's other ways of doing that, as we mentioned in the previous item. This sign does have the logo on it, but it's just not a provided for sign. Like I said earlier, there's one directional parking sign per entry and exit to and from the development, and these interior signs are not provided for. So the staff would recommend denial of the variance request.
Any questions for Mr. Shipley?
So Mark, have you seen signs that are going to direct patrons to the drive-through? If these are not in place, how am I going to know? Because I'll be there every morning, most likely. I'm very excited about this, actually.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I am too. I
and
drink
we all are,
Starbucks
right?
a
But
lot.
I'm just trying, because I know I need to know where the drive-through is.
They
and
will
so I
have
was just-
that as part of their permitted signs
Okay, so
into
that's a
and
permitted sign. Gotcha.
yes, into and out of the
Okay.
parking lot. And then they will incorporate some pavement markings as well to identify that.
So when you said there was one sign permitted, this is what you're talking about, the one
Per
sign
entry
anywhere.
and
Oh, gotcha.
exit,
Okay, I'm following you now.
to and from the parking lot. So if you go back here, those signs that are on the lower part of the screen that are labeled as
Okay.
C
Gotcha.
are what is allowed and has already been approved. And that's at your access points into the development. And that's obviously the key decision-making point as to where to go. Hopefully, once you're in the development, you know, the pavement markings and will direct you to the proper flow. And if you're there more than one time, hopefully you'll remember the next time if you make a mistake on the first round. But it should be very, very easy to follow. There's a lot of design built into the development of this entire parcel to, I think, ensure that that's not going to be a point of confusion. So, but that's kind of a summary of what is allowed and what they've already obtained approval for.
Follow that in a
Yes,
line of
thank you.
cars. that
Believe
are
me.
Backed
you know,
up.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
And all the orange cones. Did we provide for that to control the traffic?
We'll hear from the applicant.
Yes, so these are just put in place simply, as we mentioned, as traffic control. Starbucks sees even with those at the two entrance points, that they would just like an easier flow. So those are just kind of there set as a security blanket when you get into the middle of the drive-through. And the one in the middle there is strictly to kind of guide people away from the exit of the drive-through. So you do follow to that left side. Then the last point on the left is pretty much just an entrance point for the directionals to let people know they are on the right side and to enter there. So those are just two guiding points from where you actually enter the lot, just as security blankets to make sure that traffic is flowing to that correct spot.
Mark, I have a question. So the two in the bottom of the screen are approved and allowed. Can they choose to relocate those? I mean, even prior to construction, but can they choose to put those inside the lot versus the outside?
I'd have to look at the language. It says per entry
Okay.
and exit. I personally think the sign to the east, the eastern access, is going to be confusing because really you want people to go to the western access point for the drive-through.
I agree.
They can still get through
Yeah.
there, of course, but most people, the first time, I'm sure what they're going to do is turn into that first access point because that's the way we all operate. We turn into what seems to be the closest point, and it may, hopefully, once you do that the first time, you'll figure out that you need to go further down and come in from the west the second time and in the future. But those are allowed, and you know, if that's what the property owner wants to have with the development, and that has already been permitted. So
Okay. And one more question while we're looking at the site plan. The drive-through, do you have to cross the drive-through to enter the building, pedestrians?
you can, but you could also go in from through this way and in. This is a courtyard area that's going to be shared between
Okay.
Starbucks and whatever happens to the south. So that would probably be the main way that the pedestrians are going to enter the property.
Okay.
We tried to design the drive-through so it's very circuitous, and therefore nobody can ever really get up to any speed. I mean, you're at almost a very sharp curve as you're exiting the drive-through, and that's intentional, to make sure that you're pretty much at a forced stop condition, and look out for pedestrians. There's a very small amount of space there, so it's kind of like when you cross in front of Kroger, or I do. You have to watch out for traffic. I mean,
Well, I was thinking the former Chick-fil-A, it's like death
Yep.
crossing the drive-through line to go inside, so.
Well, this is just one lane, and it is designed very different from that one, the one you're talking about. So I think there's a little more protection built into this one than what you see on many drive-throughs. But people are just going to have to be on the lookout wherever you cross.
Thank
I'll
you.
probably be one of those pedestrians because I can probably walk there easily from here.
Mark, has there been any discussion of, on the southeast corner there, of making that one-way out only? Because if you go in that entrance, in order to get to the drive-through, you're going to have to drive through the parking lot, either 1, 2, or 3 parking lot.
Yeah.
If traffic went all the way down to the end and then they went north and then got in the drive-through lane, that would eliminate a lot of the cross-traffic and pedestrian traffic. And it'd be
Yeah.
simple enough to make that, exit only, do not enter, and then an arrow pointing down to the west. And
We
then they
probably
just make
did
one
talk
big
about
loop.
that when the planning commission was looking at it. I mean, we had several meetings with this development, but ultimately what was approved was basically a full access for the
So this
property.
way, you got traffic going north, and you got traffic coming south, and you got
Yep.
pedestrians
Yep.
crossing. And all of that could be cleared up just by making a loop around the perimeter. Okay, just a question.
Yeah, no, it's a good thought. We've had some concerns at the staff level about the traffic flow through there a little bit, and we had a discussion with that when the site plan was presented. that's what they ended up approving, so.
Well, Mr.
Hopefully it'll
Shipley, if
work
at
out.
the end of the day, additional signs, there's compelling evidence that additional signs somehow increase safety,
Yeah,
then that would be appropriate for a text amendment or an application for a
it
text
could
amendment.
be, yeah, it could
And,
be. Or you
know.
could also use the regulatory signs that you wouldn't need to
Sure.
obtain a text amendment for.
Sure.
Possibly. I do think that first access point is going to be, until people figure that out, it's going to be a little bit of a problem, because really you want these drive-through patrons to go to the western access point.
I have a question for you. So I'm reading on Exhibit E, subparagraph 4 Delta, with respect to directional parking signs. And the way the ordinance reads is one directional parking signs, one ground-mounted directional parking sign per entry/exit to a parking lot not to exceed 2 square feet in size and 30 inches in height. Such signs shall be set back a minimum of 15 feet from the edge of the street pavement and 5 feet from the edge of driveway and parking lot pavement. If signs are to be illuminated, internal illumination shall be used. So on the diagram that you have up, where I don't remember what the sign title was, it was probably the thank you sign, letter D, where that driveway or the drive of the drive-through exits into the parking lot. I'm not sure that this, I think I would understand the intent that we're really talking roadway pavement. However, we do have the comment edge of driveway and parking lot pavement. So in the normal course of business, would we consider a drive-through a driveway with respect to this part of the ordinance, where we could say the other sign C there that they're looking in the parking lot as an exit sign could possibly be placed, because it would be well more than 15 feet from the edge of the street pavement, and presumably we'd have to be able to say it's at least 5 feet from the edge of the driveway. So I just don't know if we would consider a drive-through a driveway in this part of the ordinance, and that's my question.
Well, I think from my perspective, the driveway's been considered as an access way, as that's how we've applied it. I'm trying to find that language, that section, that talks about directional parking signs. But I mean, to me, the objective is to control visual clutter. And if you place your allowable, your two signs that are allowed for directional parking interior to the property that really provide a more logical wayfinding purpose, then I think that's something that we could entertain at the staff level. I frankly would rather not have the signs out closer to the access point, because again, that kind of advertises that you got a drive-through, and which is kind of not really an objective of the mixed-use town center. And I think the language was just to say that they shall be set back a minimum of 15 feet, and say maximum. Minimum of 15 feet from the edge of street pavement. Now, street pavement in the context of this site and how it's been applied in the town is considered the curb line of the access street, which this is actually an access easement. It's not a public street. So basically from that red line, the directional parking sign would have to be at least 15 feet back from that curb line, and at least 5 feet off of this curb line that provides access into the property. So that's how it's been applied throughout the town on these directional parking signs. But I'm not sure that I see any reason why you couldn't move it further interior to the project if it made more sense from a wayfinding perspective.
I guess my question is, because I like you, I think you stated earlier, the directional sign that's on the eastern entrance, to me, I think is going to cause confusion. And my question is if we if we saw that, if we determine that the drive-through is indeed a driveway, as it's written in the ordinance, could you then take that eastern sign that's next to the road and move it up where they want to put the outbound sign at, by the end of the driveway, or the drive-through to have traffic travel out? That way, travel coming in would see the directional sign in at the west entrance, going through the drive-through, and then being directed out via the eastern entrance and exit. And that seems like a better traffic flow. I just don't know. The question I guess I'm stuck with is do we see, is it reasonable to interpret that a drive-through would indeed be a driveway, from the edge of the driveway and parking lot pavement? So I'm just trying to determine if we could see that as a driveway where we could put that sign there and still meet the intent of the ordinance.
The directional parking sign definition in the sign ordinance says it's a sign indicating the entrance to or exit from an off-street parking lot.
Okay, so
That's-
that answers that question. It's specific to off-street parking from a street or a road. Okay, thank you.
I mean, I agree that that sign at the eastern access point really should be revisited, and there needs to be a different arrangement there to really steer people to the west that are going to be accessing that drive-through.
Okay, thank you.
Mark, one more question. So on this layout here, there are 16 signs that in some way will say Starbucks or indicate Starbucks.
Yeah,
But
true.
eventually, that the other building in the southeast corner will be occupied by a
Other
company
entities. Yeah.
that will want their own signs
Yes.
up. So are we going to get into a big sign war when 3 other entities want to put their signs up also?
Well, I mean, the properties allowed the directional signs that the first applicant has applied for, and we've been in conversation with the property owner, so they ultimately have control over what happens beyond the footprint of the tenant spaces. So if they didn't want the directional signs, they could not allow them from their perspective. But the other entities that would be coming later would not have an opportunity for the directional signage, because you're allowed 1 per entry and exit from the parking lot. So, that's kind of a decision really ultimately for the property owner and their tenants to work out. All that staff can do is say, is the sign allowed in the ordinance, and if it is, what parameters does it have to satisfy, and we approve it if it meets those, and we reject it if it doesn't.
And Mark, just to confirm, so if there is a need for directional signs, we have signs that can already be used without having to seek approval, correct? Like,
You have like traditional traffic control type
Okay.
signage, yes,
Okay.
that you could do. And
That would
those are
be-
provided for in our sign ordinance. There's
Yeah.
examples, and then there's a manual that you refer to for those types of signs. It's an engineering document, the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, that gives you the sizes, the reflectivity, all these things that are required for traffic-related signage. So they
So
do
if-
have the opportunity to make use of those, yes.
so if the property owner wanted directional signs where we have the red Cs or the blue Cs with the red boxes, they have the ability to use these multi-purpose, these pre-approved signs,
Yeah, they
correct? I mean,
can do that.
there are signs that they can use
Yeah,
to direct everybody. Okay.
yes.
All right, do we have any further questions of the town or the applicant? Chair will entertain any motions.
I'll make a motion that we deny the variance based on language in Exhibit H, Section 109-8 appeals, where the statement variances shall not be granted to allow a larger sign or sign which is not otherwise permitted in this chapter. And on the previous exhibits that do not allow for this type of sign, only allowing for one on each entrance to the property, per exhibits E and G.
All right, I have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, do we have any discussion? All right, call for a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. All right, last item on the agenda. I will read it, and then I understand it's probably a replay of what we just talked about, but it's a public hearing on a request for a variance from the town's sign ordinance to permit a second Starbucks drive-through directional sign in the parking lot serving their facility located at 101 South Campbell Station Road, Farragut Gateway Development, 2.217 acres, Zone C1, and located in the mixed-use town center planning area. Valley Sign Surveys applicant. Applicant is still present?
Yes.
All right. Hear from the town briefly.
I guess pretty much the same. It's an identical sign as to what you reviewed on the previous agenda item.
Correct in understanding the town's reasoning for denying it is the same as the last one we just heard?
Yes, yes.
All right. Anyone have any questions of Mr. Shipley? Would the applicant like to add anything additional from the last item agenda, which is identical?
I have nothing further to add.
All right. Any of the board have any questions of the applicant or Mr. Shipley? Chair will entertain any motions.
So again, I will make a motion to deny the variance, again, per language in Exhibit H, Section 109-8 of appeals, that variances should not be granted to allow a larger sign or sign which otherwise is not permitted. And this sign is not permitted per our exhibits, it looks like D through G.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? And I'll call for a vote. All in favor, please affirm by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That being the end of the agenda, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I have one comment.
Oh, sure.
I don't know that it matters, but the agenda describes the property as 101 South Campbell Station, but the site plans call it 103 South Campbell Station. Just want to make sure it's like noted.
Okay.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Can I make one comment as well, just to the applicant? Just as a reminder from the first item, is the town advised that you do have the ability to request a text amendment and follow that process. So just wanted to remind that that is an option, as well as we've talked about other signage. So that may be a place where there's some leeway that you could work with the town on other signage that would meet your need. So I just wanted to get back to that first item because I think that's important if you want to follow up with the town. Thank you.
Absolutely. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Good evening. Thank you. This board is adjourned.